else to get united. Like, what we gotta do is meet everybody on 149th Street at the bench.
Hey dudes, welcome back to the bench. Today we got a special video because it's my birthday. But that's not gonna stop us from leaving here learning something today. I'm gonna be teaching you guys a little bit about flow and a little bit about Throwies as we break down this dude's work. He's got some phenomenal pieces. And because of his really unique style, he's gonna give us the opportunity to have a really great discussion about extensions as well. So this breakdown is gonna be jam-packed with a lot of information. Before we get into that, don't forget we are doing the Unity battle, which ends on the 19th. I got all the information you need in the description down below. So looking at this guy's work, how do you pronounce, wait, hold up, how do you pronounce this? Is it Kaisy? I hope he doesn't mind. I'm gonna call him Kaisy. I hope I'm saying that right. Apologies if I'm not. But he's got himself a really heavy K here that bends a little bit backwards and then shoots down into the right. Look at all this momentum buildup he's got here. That's an extremely powerful leg of the K there that holds up a ton of weight. Now notice he goes ahead and uses this opportunity to balance the A, the I, and the S all on this line here. Because it's such a prominent part of the K, he can dictate the next couple of letters just based off that alone and make sure they rest on it. That way he builds uniformity with line uniformity right there in those lines against this line and this line of the K. It works out gorgeously in his favor. And all of this helps to point directly to the Y right here. Now there's a thing in art where you can use lines in an image in order to point to something you want people to look at. Now the letter Y happens to be a pretty heavy letter on its own because it's a unique letter, which as a result makes it a little bit heavier since it's not something you see all the time. He doubles down on this by going ahead and making it larger than the previous letters over here, which once again helps to increase his weight. He triples down on this by giving it this hard angle upwards, which does two things. It not only increases the negative space here, which as we discussed in my negative space tutorial, creates anticipation over here, which increases weight. It also creates a nice triangular composition for the overall name as a whole. And then he quadruples down on this whole entire thing by having the entire name pretty much point and lead into the Y. Now I don't know if he knew all of these different fundamentals that would come together in order to equate to an amazing piece, but that's why this thing works. That's why the Y is the way it is, and that's how it functions. But he runs into an issue that we didn't previously talk about. So what is the issue? What's the problem that he now has to solve? Well, the issue now is the fact that he's got such a small lower left side of the K. He's built all of this negative space over in this direction, which, as I just mentioned, builds anticipation with all this negative space, and he's got to go ahead and fill that. That way it can help hold up the K. So what does he do? He's got an incredible extension that comes out this way and another one that comes down. From here, it's still not enough. He still has to fill in some of that negative space. Otherwise, the K is going to have too much weight added to it. So what does he go ahead and do? He adds 3D going down into the right in order to help fill in the rest of the negative space that he needs to fill in. Just to kind of reiterate and re-explain this, in case it didn't make sense. If all of this was negative space, then the weight of the K would end up being tremendously more weight because there's all this anticipation here where nothing is happening. It's potential for the K to fall over. So it may seem contradictory, but what he ends up doing is he adds an extension, which you would think adds weight, but although it does add weight, it adds less weight than negative space in this instance. And then he goes on to add even more extensions, which do the same thing. Yes, they add weight, but they add less weight than the negative space would have added. And those extensions, they double as a counterbalance to hold up this section of the K. Absolutely brilliant. That admittedly is something a little bit more advanced that newer graffiti artists aren't really going to be able to do realistically, but if you are more advanced or you're intermediate, give this a shot. Try it out on your own piece. Mess with the weight a little bit, knock a letter off balance intentionally with a plan to go ahead and rebalance it a different way, using potentially extensions. We can see he does something very, very similar right here, where once again he's got a huge leg of the K right there. He's got the A balancing, the I, and the S all balancing on the K. It's a bit of an artist habit for him, but this piece is a lot more angular than the previous one. And he uses these angles to his advantage because he's got a lot of line uniformity and similarity just through those angles alone. As you can see, the Y is uniform to the S to the I. Extensions have uniformity, like the uniformity goes deep in this piece. But he runs into the same issue. He's got a really heavy Y in order to counterbalance the left side of the name, and yet he's got all this negative space right here in this area, which once again he fills up with beautiful extensions. Notice he doesn't have as many extensions here in the center. Why? Because he doesn't need them. He uses tinier, smaller, more nuanced extensions in that tighter area because then you can actually see the extension. You can make it out as they're not too big, being obscured by other things. But once he gets the space for it, he begins to incorporate much larger, much more bombastic extensions that reach out and really spread themselves the distance. Now keep in mind, the extensions throughout all this, they're serving a purpose, right? They're not just there for no reason. Not only are they filling the negative space, let's ignore that for now because we already talked about that, but they're also enhancing flow. That's an important thing to keep in mind. Your extensions cannot be a detriment to your piece. If they are, they're useless and you gotta give them the boot. You gotta keep an overall functionality to the extensions because once again, they're a detail and details are useless by nature. So you need to give them a purpose to exist. And they do a great job of having the purpose of increasing flow. We can see this as the K flows with uniformity and similarity right there with that extension. This little pop right here in the serif of the extension itself rides along well against the edge of the K. He also flows the extensions with themselves because he's got this massive extension right over here, and what does he do? Well, he adds this arrow over here that flows line uniformity and similarity right there. All of this ties well together in order to put this piece into a beautiful bow that comes together in a gorgeous way. Like, I'm loving this piece, man. So when you're trying extensions on your own piece, be sure to give them purpose. Be sure to give them a reason to exist, and make sure it's not just you blowing smoke. Make sure the reason is actually justified and serving the purpose it needs to serve. Otherwise, your extension is useless and therefore is probably a detriment to the piece overall. Let's skip into the throw up, shall we? Now check this out. You gotta try this on your throw up. Like, I'm not even kidding. You need to try this on your throw ups because I see a lot of you guys have issues with this. So what is this? Now that I've buried the lead and everyone's asking themselves, it's defining your basic box with little indentations like that right there. That little indentation is key. If you can do that right there, this is going to help define your structure all that much more. And he does this in multiple spaces, like here also helps, right? And even that, those tiny details illustrate where your basic boxes would have been. And that's really what throw-ups are all about. Because if we illustrate the letter K within here, and mind you, I don't recommend practicing throw-ups the way I'm illustrating here, then we could clearly see what kind of leg of the K he has, right? We can also easily tell what kind of arm of the K that is. This right here cannot be that kind of K. It's not possible. The reason for that is because he's already told us and illustrated that this indentation indicates the verticality, and this indentation indicates the return back to the actual stem itself. And that's exactly what the power of an inline does. This right here being an inline, a line that goes into the throw up. These inlines are responsible for separating different fundamental boxes from one another. And when you're doing a throw up where things are typically very rounded and very, shape oriented, it's easy to lose a lot of that structure. It's easy to kind of take a letter structure and completely abstract it due to the round nature of throw-ups, right? Especially if you're keeping it simple and you're just learning throw-ups where everything really should be round just to kind of build up good habits. It's really easy to lose those structures. But if you take those inlines and you take advantage of them when necessary, you can really build a structure out very well. You'll see he does a great job of this on the Y as well, right? You have this basic box, which is this part of the Y. You then have this line right here, which once again indicates the verticality, and then you have this one, which indicates the kind of horizontal, and then you have this box right here, which indicates the vertical. Sorry for the kind of wavy lines. I ended up hitting the camera a little bit on the side. It's right beside my tablet there, but that's what that is, which ironically is a little bit more similar to your more calligraphic or script Ys that you might see, and less similar to your more basic print font Ys that we're accustomed to. But it still works out great. And there's little things you could do in order to tweak something like this. You could just instead shoot straight down if you wanted to, bridging those two gaps together, which would work perfectly fine as well. And instead of being the more calligraphic or script Y that we previously mentioned, it would instead be something a little bit more like that. You even have some people who decide to do things really differently with their Y, but you can instead do something where you shoot down like some other throw-ups we've seen in the past, which would be more like your typical capital Y anyway. Granted, this example doesn't really use inlines, right? That's a little bit of a rant I went on, if you don't mind. So try that on your throw-ups. Be sure to use a good use of inlines like these, or be sure to define structure like this in order to help go ahead and change the letter structure entirely. But dudes, that pretty much wraps up today's video. I'm gonna go ahead and enjoy my birthday, man. Hopefully you guys don't mind. Don't forget, we do have the Unity friendly battle with tactical styles. I got all the information you need in the description down below. If you want to partake in it, you still got some time left. It's not too late. Also, if you guys are new here, subscribe. We come out with weekly videos. We got the best how to do graffiti tutorials right up here with more graffiti content right down here. One last update, if you don't mind, I'm currently in the process of getting all of my books professionally edited and formatted, and they'll be coming to the site soon. So keep an eye out for that. I'll catch you guys back here next week. As always, thanks for watching.